Jester, level 18 upgrade. It's finally time to replace that 27 megahertz with 2.4. This was donated to me by rcbarrier. The question is, how am I going to link it to Jester? I didn't want to buy a Spektrum receiver, so I went with the orange RX 3-channel ground. These are supposed to work perfectly fine with the Spektrum. So let's go ahead and open it up and check it out. And there we go, the orange receiver, and yes, it looks like it's in perfect condition. And then inside of here we got, of course, the binding plug, and it looks like some instructions. Let's just pull this apart. Yes, check that out. And little instructions, binding process. I'll just go ahead and show you when I actually do it. But that receiver is small, way smaller than what I'm used to. But finally, I'm not going to have that long antenna. It's going to be short. So let's go ahead and get this thing installed and bind it to Jester. It's going to make my life a lot easier if I go ahead and take out the motor in order to change out the receiver. So I'm going to remove these two screws, one for the gear cover and one that holds the motor in. So I'm going to go ahead and pull off the gear cover, open this battery door, slide out the ESC, slide the motor off to the side and pull it back. And now I have easy access to the receiver box. There's 4 screws that need to come out. Before I take this thing apart, I'm also going to take out this grub screw that holds in the antenna tube. First I'm going to go ahead and pry off the wire tie and then the receiver box itself. Now I'm just going to go ahead and unplug the servo as well as the ESC, get a screwdriver and pry this out. And then finally I have to get the antenna, pull it through that hole and through the slot that goes in the receiver box. And now it's time to go ahead and bind this receiver. So what I did was I plugged in the servo and the ESC. You don't have to plug in the servo, I just did it for convenience. And then also put in this bind plug. Now we're going to turn on the remote, make sure that it's set to Jester, which it is, and now turn on the ESC. As you can tell, it is blinking wildly. That means it's ready to bind. So what I'm going to do is go through the menus until I get to bind. Then select bind. And that's it. It's blinking slower. Bam! It is now bound. So now I'm going to go ahead and unplug it from the power. Pull out the bind plug. And I am done binding this receiver to the remote. Next, it's time to go ahead and install it into the waterproof receiver box. The best way to mount it would be just like that. That way the antenna can feed directly out of the receiver box, since it's so short, and all the way to the antenna tube holder. So I'm just going to slide that in, push it down, and now I'm going to plug in the servo, which goes in to, obviously, servo. It's not channel 1 since it's not Traxxas. And then the ESC gets plugged into throttle. Then I just gotta feed the antenna tube through the bottom, across the slot, and then up through this hole right here. And now I'm gonna go ahead and put the battery tie down with the right amount of length on the wires. And now all I have to do is tuck in all the wires just right, hold the antenna off to the side, put that little notch into this lower lip, and then push down the receiver box and reinstall the 2 screws on each side. And finally I can install a much shorter antenna tube. Slide that into place and then redo the grub screw. All that's left is reattaching the motor, slide that back into position, push the ESC back into place, close the battery door, connect all the wires, put the proper spacing in between the pinion and the spur, and reattach the gear cover. Even though the receiver is installed, I still have to program the ESC. So I have the Spektrum on, and now I'm going to push and hold the on button for the ESC. Once it turns red, I'm going to let it go. Once it blinks once, I'm going to pull down the throttle. Blinks twice, push into reverse, and now it's done. So let's go and see if it works. That works. Now how about the throttle? Yep, works perfectly fine. One problem, the steering's reversed. Now all I have to do to reverse the servo is just go straight into the menu, go down to reverse, steering, reversed, and bam. It is now normal. Now that everything's been programmed, Jester is ready to go. And now I can finally say Jester is 2.4 gigahertz, no less, with a Spektrum. Thanks again, rcbarrier. I really do appreciate the donation. And now, if I ever want to get dual servos, all I'm going to have to do is get a Y cable. That way I can hook up the second servo since there isn't a second port on that receiver. No biggie. But this upgrade is done. And that was Jester's level 18 upgrade.